Path of Exile 2's new patch 0.4 is coming on the 12th, and with it we get a new druid class as well as a ton of changes to the game. In this video today, we're going to be going through a lot of those changes, talking about some of those patch notes. I'm going to be just pretty much going through the patch notes as you see below. And in my typical fashion of upfronting the knowledge of my videos, let me just kind of give you the too long didn't watch this entire thing. And I'm going to have a link to the patch notes in the description, so if you want to just go ahead and read those notes instead, you can please by all means go ahead and do that. So the biggest things that are happening here are a number of changes to the way that a lot of the runes work. Now runes are limited to like one. They're changing the name of them. I think they're called augments now. As far as all the ascendancies go, all the ascendancies have gotten a lot of tweaking. Monks got some interesting nerfs in this patch, but they also got some weird buffs too. So we're going to have to see how they shake out. So for example, base swing speed went from 1.4 to now 1.65 for everyone. So that benefits the monk. But a lot of the supports or a lot of the primary passive skills or notables that monks were using got nerfs. So again, we're going to have to see how that shakes out. Monk seems to be the one that suffers the most from a lot of these ascendancy changes and these skill passives. Ranger, on the other hand, got both of their ascendancies almost completely reworked. Tactician got a lot of really cool fun buffs, especially across a lot of their skill gems. The Huntress, which Amazon, got a pretty interesting change to its ascendancy. So now it has an ascendancy its ascendancy skill that allowed them to basically throw a javelin and it would consume one of the three: frenzy, endurance, or power charge. It would consuming one of those would create a specific element. Now it will always consume a charge, any charge, and always be lightning. And then further into the ascendancy, you can dip into all three elements at once, and we'll show how that works. But that's I guess like the high level of a lot of the ascendancy changes. Oh, also the Smith for Warrior got a lot of really fun and interesting tweaks, and I think they're really setting it up to work very well with the way that the bear operates, and to have a little bit of a, I don't want to say the term multi-class, but to have a lot of synergy between the talisman being able to shapeshift into a bear and the Smith from the Warrior. I think there's gonna be a lot of really fun stuff there. But for the most part, the rest of the ascendancies just got buffs or kind of changed the way that they operate for the better. Across the board though, majority of skills got tweaked to be a little bit better. All uniques by and large were increased, so their viability thus increases. But that also two big things that have changed. They have helped out performance substantially, especially if you're playing on console. They've done a lot to do kind of dealing with how cores operate with the games, because I know it's the CPUs where the bottleneck happens. So this should increase performance on consoles, especially in the Endgame. And speaking of Endgame, they have revamped the way the Endgame works, in the sense that you don't just scale up the difficulty and the number of creatures on the map, thus causing performance issues. They scale up the difficulty of creatures on the map. So it was causing, they have kind of jumped back and forth between this. It was, hey, this has a linear scale. Okay, now this has a linear scale of both difficulty and monsters. This is causing performance issues. Let's bring back the quantity and just increase the difficulty. So that's the way it is right now in 0.4, and they're going to see how that shakes out. But that's the too long didn't watch this entire video. If that's all you wanted to know, please feel free to go ahead and shut the video down. I want to be respectful of your time. You can jump ahead to any part of this video that interests you the most. I've got all of the ascendancies broken into sections, so you can just jump ahead to the ones that interest you, like I said. And if you are heading out and you found the information in this video helpful, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. Each one of those things helps me out in a huge way. You can also find a link to my Twitch below, where we will be streaming the Druid once it goes live on December 12th. That is when this patch goes live. That's when the Druid goes live. It's also part of a free weekend. So if you want to play the game and don't want to actually pay for it, you can now do that. The game will be free once it launches, but right now it's still in early access. Let's get started here on the big 0.4 update for Path of Exile 2. So here we have the patch notes, and if you never watched any of my patch notes videos, pretty much what I do is highlight the things that I want to talk about. I highlight them into different color coding, and we'll go through that stuff as we hit it. But Fate of the Vol is the new league change that's coming. That's not really necessarily a change, but it's just a thing that's coming with the game. Now, as far as general improvements and player changes go, like I said in the opening, significant optimizations to the CPU performance have been made. These changes both improve the speed of key operations and allows you to utilize more of your cores. This basically results in a 25% boost at minimum. So basically across the board, whether you're playing on a console or a PC, you should notice better performance. So this says overall you should get at least 25% boost and significantly less frame spikes when CPU bound. This is especially impactful for heavy gameplay situations. Note that if you are GPU bound, you will not see any improvement to these changes. What that means is if you have, let's just say a GTX 1080 and you still are having poor performance, that's your bottleneck. So that's what they mean by GPU bound. So those are general improvements. Now, as far as player changes go, some of these we illustrated in the beginning. Tailwind got a significant nerf. This is something that the Pathfinder, Ranger was utilizing quite a bit. That now grants 1% increased movement speed, 2% increased skill speed, previously 3%, 10% increased evasion rating, previously 15%, and prevents 1% of damage from deflected hits per stack. So this right here, for example, the stack would go up to 10, I believe it was. So this would be 20%. Would have been 30%. Now it is 20%. And as you can see, it's in red. That is a nerf. But things that are in green are a buff. Base unarmed attack time is now 1.65 attacks per second versus previously 1.4. So this will help some builds. Well, it should help everyone pretty much. Rage regeneration now pauses rage decay similarly to the other means of gaining rage. This means that your rage will never decay while it is regenerating. So this is going to be awesome as we start to take a look at the shaman that is going to be playing with a lot of rage as they've showcased in the reveal for the druid. Also, all rage spending costs have been changed to 10 rage. Rage no longer causes a visual effect on your character until you have 10 or more rage, so that you know that you can use those abilities. So this will scale across the board and have the effect of all rage costing things. So this will be an interesting thing to see how this works out for your warrior. And I think there's just like, since it is a strength intelligence build, or I'm sorry, strength intelligence character, the druid, I think, synergizes with so much stuff that the warrior already does. And it's going to be interesting to see how this rage and everything can come to the fore with shaman right there next to the warrior passive trait. But those are just some of the base changes. These other things are kind of like a little just, cool, whatever. But let's go into how some of the ascendancies are changing. Starting off, we'll talk about Deadeye, one of the Ranger ascendancies. So for starters, Wind Ward has been removed, and we'll show off the actual skill tree in a second here. And now Bullseye now requires called shots, and Bullseye now applies 10 critical weakness. Previously it was 5. Let's jump over here to the skill tree and see what that looks like. So Wind Ward down here is 3% less damage taken per tailwind. That has been removed. And called shots, it says grant skill called shots. What this does is it applies a socketed mark skill to an unmarked target. You now have to have a conjunction here with this, right? Bullseye applies 5 critical weaknesses to enemies when consuming a mark on them. Now, I've been toying around with my good buddy Fervor Gaming about the possibility of a Deadeye in conjunction with the druid's capability to play around with marking things and summoning up wolves. So all this stuff I think would be really fun in conjunction to make a sort of ranger build, especially the way that these critical weaknesses work. But there's also too this little ditty. And again, just keep in mind, Bullseye now requires called shots. So I think that they're going to take this and put it above. So you'd basically go accuracy, Bullseye, mark effect, and then called shots. I think this will be a 4-node chain. But speculation there. But added a new Mirage Deadeye Ascendancy passive skill, which grants the Mirage Deadeye meta skill. Mirage Deadeye, while active, firing a ranged attack projectile will create a mirage that uses socketed ranged attacks for a short duration, then vanishes. You cannot create another mirage for a short time after initially creating one. So basically, you have to keep using other socketed range attacks, and you can kind of wombo combo that however you want. So I think that, yes, this does lose a little bit of durability, right, in the way that Wind Ward was being used. But I think this opens the door to a lot of really fun things with range attack projectiles for the Deadeye. Now, along with Deadeye, we have Pathfinder, the other Ranger Ascendancy that also got a significant amount of tweaking. So Contagious Contamination and Practical Remedies have both been removed, and Running Assault also now grants cannot be heavy stunned while sprinting. Let's take a look at what that means. So this is our that's practical remedies. That is now gone. And nope, contagious over here. Contagious contamination is now gone as well. So again, I don't know if this just means that these shift down, right? Like, so now overwhelming toxicity is just right here, and this is out. But running assault is 50% less movement speed penalty from using skills while moving, is now also, in addition, cannot be heavy stunned while sprinting. But we have a new Pathseeker multi-choice ascendancy passive skill. That is right here, added a new Pathseeker multi-choice ascendancy passive skill, like I just said. But this basically allows you to jump to another portion of the passive tree, which is huge. You can either allocate to the Path of the Warrior or the Path of the Sorceress, and by selecting it, it then grants you 4 passive skill points. Or each choice, for that matter, sorry. So each choice grants 4 passive skill points, meaning I would then start over here, Path of the Warrior, or over here, Path of the Sorceress. And this is, I think, a key way for you to kind of make that ranger style of player you wanted to make. Because ever since we saw the druid, I'm like, okay, how can I combine this with ranger in the conventional sense of like a ranger using druid spells? And this, I think, is a really interesting way to do that. Sorry, my allergies are crushing me if you can't tell. This is an interesting way to do it because it jumps you right over here to the warrior, which is just right in line with the rest of the strength intelligence tree. Or same thing over here with sorceress, being able to jump over them or modify any of the current ranger stuff from those different angles. So I really, really like this one. Also, Traveler's Wisdom now requires Pathseeker, which is this new one that was just added in. This gets a little green. Traveler's Wisdom now instead grants attribute passive skills. They offer additional options: 5% increased damage, 5% global defense, or 5% cost efficiency. So this will give us just a little bit more bang for our buck for going up in this direction. I think this is a really cool way to morph and change Pathfinder in a very fun way. Next up for the Huntress, we have, the Amazon. And the big thing here is Elemental Surge. That has been reworked. So let's take a look at how it works right now. If I hover over this, when you consume a power charge, trigger Elemental Surge to gain 3 cold, Endurance is 3 fire, Frenzy is 3 lightning. That's the way it works now. With the patch, when you consume a charge, trigger the surge to gain 3 lightning surges, and you can stop right there. And they've also reworked Surging Avatar. So Surging Avatar is 50% chance for surges to suffuse your projectiles without being consumed. This instead makes it so when you consume a charge, trigger Elemental Surge to instead gain 2 cold, 2 lightning, and 2 fire. So basically you can choose, do I want to just make a lightning build? Cool, well I can stop right here. Do I want to jump into all 3 elements? I can go through the increased elemental damage into this. So it gives you options here versus focusing on one specific charge style. Now all charges will make lightning in this case, and all charges will make all 3 elements in this case. So it gives you, I think, a little bit more playability without having to focus down a single charge route. That is the only change to Amazon, but I think it's a pretty significant one to make. You can make a pretty easy Javazon build just by going down that step into Elemental Surge. Now for our Ritualist, the other Ascendancy, it's not so much that they have like a huge change, rework, but they did have a huge change. Ritual Sacrifice, still a modifier, duration is 82 to 120 seconds. Let's jump over here. That's this one right there. As the Whispers demand, this is what gives you Ritual Sacrifice. Previously, it only lasted 15 to 20 seconds from levels 1 to 20. This now lasts 82 to 120 seconds. And if you put any quality into this, then it goes up 20 seconds versus 2 seconds. So it's a pretty massive gain. And then the Corrupted Life Force, that's the one that gives you Blood Boil. That's right up here. It also now deals 15% more damage to enemies affected by Blood Boil. So Ritualist didn't get a ton of reworks, but I got a pretty substantial one, a pretty substantial buff to the way that it is meant to be played in taking all those modifiers from rare creatures. Next up are our Warrior Ascendancies, starting with Warbringer. The very first character I ever made, and probably one of my favorites still. Imploding Impacts now also grants fully broken armor. You inflicted increases all damage taken from its hits instead. That's the most confusing sentence, but what it's saying here is that you can break enemy armor to below 0, and it's saying that fully broken armor, you do more damage. So it gives you an increase to doing damage against broken armor. And then Ancestral Warhorn minion summoned by the Warbringer's Answered Call, which is right here. That gives you your Ancestral Spirits. It now more consistently hits close-up enemies with the second part of its slam attack. So a huge quality of life buff because you're doing tons of slam stuff anyway if you're going through that whole build. My build that I've showcased on the channel before has tons of slams that interweave with totems to create even more slams. So this just creates that kind of continuing feedback loop of slam attacks with Warbringer. Titan had some consolidating done to it. So now Surprising Strength has been removed and Crushing Impacts now also grants 25% more damage against heavy stun enemies. Let's bring it to the board, Bob. So this is Surprising Strength, 50% more damage against heavy stun enemies. So instead, this notable has been halved to 25 and just been brought into this, right? So 25, right? Yeah, 25. So it's been brought into Crushing Impacts. So this says your hits are crushing blows, and in addition, it will be 50% more damage against heavy stun enemies. So those two have been consolidated. It looks like Surprising Strength's notable location has been swapped with added a new Mountain Splitter Ascendancy passive skill, which grants every third slam skill that doesn't create fissures, which you use yourself, causes one additional aftershock ahead and to each side of the initial area. Requires Crushing Impacts. So it looks like it would come down here and go into where Surprising Strength is. So every third slam that you create, not like a totem or anything like that, that which you use yourself causes one additional aftershock ahead and to the sides. So a lot of gameplay that could probably be done here with the way that there's plenty of slams in the way the bear works for the druid. So I'm wondering how much of this can be layered in with the Titan rather than going down, rather than choosing druid, you would go Titan and you would start to move your way up into the strength intelligence tree as you see fit, but maybe focusing more on the slam capabilities, aftershock capabilities, fissure capabilities, what's the other one? Jagged ground, and then pulling some of that action in from the bear talisman. I think could be pretty fun here for the Titan. Let's take a look at the last ascendancy here. So the Smith of Kitava is the newest of the warrior ascendancies, and it has gotten quite a bit of tweaking since it came out. But in this patch, we're going to get a big change to the things. So right now we see this little node here, can only use normal body armor, blah, blah, blah. But then we go through all these to make your own body armor, right? Well, now each one of these nodes is going to add 200 armor in addition to whatever its effect it currently says. So 200 armor plus body armor grants blah, 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 or 200 armor plus our body armor grants 20% increased strength. So whatever these say, now will also say plus 200 armor. But some of them are getting removed and replaced. So padded plates for cold resistance, lead lining for lightning resistance, and heavy bracing for stun threshold are all three getting removed. And they're getting replaced. So as you can see, each one of those is getting removed. They're getting replaced with Kitavan Imprint, Spiked Plates, and Tribute to Atula, which are going to do 60% increased glory generation, 100% increased thorns damage, or 30% increased spirit, respectively, for each one of those. So you'll see how that's going to work. Internal Lair now reduces critical damage taken by 100%, so it's doubling up from what it was 50% before. And Heat Proofing now causes your body armor to grant the bonus of being unaffected by all damaging elements previously just ignite. So a very nice buff to that. Interestingly thing here though is we have this capability, the Heat of the Forge. It says grant skill fire spell on hit. The fire spell on hit melee skill granted by Heat of the Forge on Smith of Kitava now costs no mana when triggering socketed spells. It also now gains 10% increased damage per level, up to 200% increased damage at gem level 20. So again, this is something that you could play along really well with druid capabilities to have a lot of fun with all of those. I mean, you could even just use the lava from the druid or just play along very heavily with all those bear stuff, all the bear skills that are themed more along the lines of how the warrior already plays, right? Lots of fire, lots of area effect, lots of big, big boom, bam. Manifest weapon skill granted by living weapon on Smith Kitava now changes targets less frequently and thus spends more time actively attacking. Additionally, as a mace has a cooldown of 6 seconds from 10 for its slam skill. Quarterstaff has a cooldown of 6 rather than 10 on the sweep skill, and as a spear, fixed bug where the damage dealt while it's dashing towards enemies didn't cover the full distance of the dash. So a lot of really good quality of life things here, and I think this is probably one of the biggest buffs for the Smith of Kitava's Smith Masterwork notable, because before, that armor falls off and you're like, well, great. And that sounds so fun. So trying to get that armor amped up even more through each one of those makes me want to go down this portion of it. Whereas before I'm like, well, my armor is just not going to have an armor fall off unless I'm constantly being able to attribute more and more to it. So that's a huge buff. And I also like how that Heat of the Forge really is going to change how this works. This is the only ascendancy for the warrior that I've yet to play. So I do want to put some time into this with this patch. Moving over to the Witch with the Infernalist and the Blood Mage, we get two pretty quick little updates here. Basically, Seething Body has changed. It's now going to operate different. So it says no longer grants while on high Infernal Flame, you and allies in your presence gain 50% damage as fire damage. That's not a thing anymore. Now, Seething Body now grants gain Elemental Archon, which I'll show you in a sec, when you cast a spell while on high Infernal Flame. Elemental Archon does not expire while on high Infernal Flame and lose it when it does, when you reach max Infernal Flame. What is that? So, the Archon skills are all up here. And this isn't really, that's Invigorating Archon, but these are the three elemental ones. You have Archon of the Flame, Archon of the Blizzard, and Embodiment of Lightning, which is the Lightning Archon one. There it is, Archon of the Storm. These three capabilities are going to trigger your Elemental Archon, which is this. It's an Archon buff. And it's going to give you Lightning is a type of Archon buff. Lightning grants 25% more lightning damage with spells, converts 100% of elemental damage with spells to lightning damage, cannot deal non-lightning damage with spells, and hits with spells have 100% more chance to shock. So it's going to be according to whichever one you've chosen, lightning, fire, or cold, and it's going to be able to turn that on. Ice Archon, for example, here, same exact thing. It's got freeze and cold damage. And flame obviously is going to have fire or flammability and ignite, as it were, whatever it is. So that is how that all works. And for the Blood Mage, Whispers of the Flesh now also grants targets cursed by you to have 100% reduced life regeneration. It just kind of keeps Blood Mage doing what it does best, which is tons of critical hits. With our Sorceress, Stormweaver gets a pretty cool little buff here. So Refracted Infusion now grants, when collecting an elemental infusion, gain another different elemental infusion. That's it. There's no 50% chance. So it is a guarantee for that to happen. Storm's Recollection. Now, those remnants that are created can be gathered 50% further away. So you have a larger suck-in radius. I don't know what I'm going to say there, but I said it. Multiplying Squalls now grants +2 to the limit of elemental skills. Here's where all those are. So we have Refracted Infusion over here. That is now a 100% chance. And this over here for Storm's Recollection, that has an increased area in which you can suck those into you. Again, I'm just going to stay with that word, I suppose. Multiplying Squalls down here has a +2 limit for elemental skills. For the Chronomancer, we have just one change. Inevitable Agony, granted by Inevitability, has been updated. So now it ignores the curse limit, which is lovely, and now causes cursed targets to take 50% of hit damage dealt to them while cursed again when curse expires. This used to be only 20%. So this scales up to 33% by level 20. And if we look over here, this is the actual ability. If you did not know, curse all targets in an area after a short delay, causing a portion of damage they take from hits to be tracked by the curse's debuff. When the debuff's duration expires, they take that track damage again all at once. So that has been changed and improved for the Chronomancer quite a bit. Moving into the Mercenary, we have the Gemling Legionnaire. Thaumaturgical Infusion now grants 1% to max cold resistance per 3 blue support gems socketed. This was previously 4. So basically it's the same recipe across the board. Cold resistance for blue, fire resistance for red, and lightning resistance for green. And it used to be 3 support gems. Now it's 4. That's Thaumaturgical Infusion. And then Thaumaturgical Dynamism, granted by Advanced Thaumaturgy notable passive, now generates a charge once every 5 seconds. Previously, though, it was 8 seconds. So quite a bit of an increase there. Not a lot to show on the actual skill chart, but that's how that's going to be working for the Gemling Legionnaire. So for the Tactician, we had a change here with Unleash Hell. This is the ability Unleash Hell gives you Supporting Fire. Supporting Fire now operates much faster and much wider and has a better cooldown. So it went from 40 seconds to now 20 seconds. And you went from firing a volley every 2 seconds to 0.775 seconds. And you went from firing 4 volleys to 6 volleys with a width of 7.5 to now 14. But your attack damage went from 1140% to 763%. So you basically now have a faster firing, wider ranged, I guess you could say, capability that has overall an increased damage per second. I like this a lot more than the previous one. Strategic Embankment's notable passive, which is this one right here, totems you place grant embankment auras, has been updated to be Artillery Ballista no longer grants 40% increased immobilization buildup, now grants 20% increased skill speed. Siege Ballista no longer grants 50% increased damage against immobilized enemies, now grants 25% more damage against immobilized enemies. From what I understand here is this is the difference between swapping additive and multiplicative. If I got that wrong in the comments, please let me know. That's how I understand this change. Mortar Cannon now grants 25% of damage gained as extra fire from 15%, so an 10% increase. And added Spell Totem to Embankment Auras, as well as Spell Totem grants 50% increased critical hit chance. And then 2 quick buffs here for the Witchhunter. Witchbane now has enemies have maximum concentration equal to 30% of their max life, previously 40. This is a buff in case you thought it was otherwise. And then Ceremonial Abulation now instead grants Sorcery Ward, also protects against physical and chaos damage for your Witchhunter. Moving into the Monk, we have Invoker, which is my favorite monk build from the old Frost Monk staff days, and Protect Me from Harm now grants 35% less evasion rating, previously 50%. So if I take a look at this, that's over here. This is 50% less evasion rating. That is now just 35%. Physical damage reduction from armor is based on your combined armor and evasion rating. More on this later, but it overall is just going to be a nerf for the monk. The Soul Springs Eternal now additionally grants meta skills have 50% increased spirit regeneration efficiency. This was 35% before. Soul Spring is it's right over here somewhere, right? Soul Spring from on the right side. Aha, there it is. Meta skills gained 35%. This is now 50%. So that got a bit of a buff. Unbound Avatar skill granted by An I Shall Rage has been updated. So now it has a cooldown of 12 seconds and it gained Unbound Fury when you inflict an elemental ailment with a hit on an enemy. No longer has a limit, or I'm sorry, like kind of a cap. It says before no more than once every 0.2 seconds for each type of ailment. That's no longer there. But Shocking and Igniting now grants 1 Unbound Fury, previously 2. So there is a bit of a balance here. And Protect Me from Harm. This doesn't look terrible, but when we come down into the passives, I'm going to show you how this is actually the monk. I think is going to be harder to get as much evasion as fast as we've been used to, and we'll see that a little bit later. Lastly, the Acolyte of Chayula has had a lot of really cool buffs here. Embrace the Darkness now gives +10 max darkness per level rather than 8, and Into the Breach skill, basically if you don't know how Into the Breach works, it's this right here, Waking Dream. You go Into the Breach. This gives you this capability which spawns flames of Chayula around, and those flames of Chayula have red, blue, purple, and red, blue, and purple colors, and each one of them will give you certain things. So this has been changed. So red now gives 15% more, or 15% life rather than 7. Leech 15% mana rather than 7. Purple flames now last 8 seconds rather than 5, and the flames are now created closer to the player. So overall, a big quality of life buff for Into the Breach, because those are it's 15% life leech that you're gaining. So it's a nice buff. Then Choice of Power, Choice of Life, and Choice of Mana, which is all the way down here, any one of these 3. So all flames of Chayula that you manifest are blue, purple, or red, now have the effect of increased effect of the Remnant and increased Remnant's pickup range. So you pick them up from further, and they're going to further increase that overall capability that they were doing as a red, blue, or purple, whatever it was. Then Void Illusion itself will have a cooldown of just a flat 4 seconds on all levels of skill, and it will deal overall more damage as well. So it was 350 to 1268. That's the new thing, new value. It used to be 185 to 670. Now Void Illusion though does have a bit of a nerf in here that it says by Grasp of the Void now lasts 3-second cooldown charges rather than 1. So that is your Acolyte of Chayula, which got itself a nifty little buff here in this patch. Moving into the passive skill tree changes, I don't know enough of these to really speak cogently about them. I'm not smart enough. I don't know all of them. So I'm going to talk about the ones I know probably the best, which is mainly just monk stuff. And the two things I want to talk about are Hollow Palm Technique and the Walker of the Wilds. So for one, the Hollow Palm Technique now grants 1% more attack speed per 75 item rating on equipped armor, previously 25. So that's a 50-point increase. So here it is right now. This is saying physical damage based on their skill, 1% more attack speed per 25. It is now going to be per 75 right there. But base unarmed skill time is now 1.65 attack speed, right? That's a blanket buff that happened to everyone. So this might be okay. We'd have to test to see how this works. It might just kind of adjust to fall roughly how it should. I don't know enough about numbers. I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. So that's something to consider, but that is a nerf to the monk's tree. In addition, Walker of the Wilds keystone, which is right here, has been removed. Mana Leech recovers based on elemental damage types instead of physical damage. It's been removed from the tree and been made into a lineage support gem, which means you have to hunt for it in the end game. So that's kind of not so fun. So those two things have been removed from the passive tree, but we get a ton of new clusters added. 3 new attack area of effect clusters to the monk part of the tree, 2 projectile speed clusters to passives to the mercenary section, new bow cluster and modified projectile cluster in the ranger section of the tree, granting surpassing chance to fire an additional arrow, and added a new cluster between witch and monk called Remnant Attraction, because both of them have stuff like that plays into them. But those are your passive changes. There's a lot of other stuff in here. Again, I don't know enough of it to really speak to all of it, but please kind of check through these to make sure any of the ones for your builds were not changed and how it might affect them. Now, into the gem changes. Support gems across the board have had quite a bit of a change here. So like I was saying, the world drop lineage supports are now less common overall. Specific lineage supports have been adjusted to relative to others. So basically what they're saying here is you have to spot farm these in the end game on the Atlas map. And then across the board, though, all of those lineage support gems have gotten their everything increased. I started to highlight it and I was like, it's all of it. All of it that is a lineage support gem has now gotten significantly better. So you can see all of them in this location here. So support gems did have quite a bit of a change, and it's just kind of know how those work. And it's mainly the lineage support gems that got a bit of a tweaking here. Skill changes, tons of stuff happening in this location. Again, check the characters that you like to play. Make sure that none of these have been affected in the way that you don't want them to be affected, but some standout ones. Ancestral Cry here. Volcanic Eruption now deals 165 to 211 attack damage, previously 82 to 105. So that is a nice damage increase, but now triggers volcanic steps every 1.2 meters traveled rather than just on footsteps. So you have to travel further for this to trigger more. Arc now has 50% increased magnitude of shock inflicted instead of 50% more. So it went from multiplicative to additive. Again, let me know in the comment section if I got that wrong. It might be reversed, but I'm pretty sure that is a nerf and it went from multiplicative to additive. Ball Lightning. This had a lot of changes here. So now deals 2 to 33 lightning damage, previously 1 to 19, scaling up to 6 to 105 lightning damage at level 20, but now has 375% more chance to shock. That's down from 450. Down from 750, which I thought was 450, which is not how math works. So it went down like 375%. Man, I'm the best at this. So yeah, that one got a bit of a nerf. Conversely, though, fire infused damage and everything else of that sort went up. So you have basically a trade-off here. Shock isn't happening as much, and the fire damage scaled very rapidly here. Barrier Invocation now reserves 30 spirit. So basically, a lot of the spirit things in general, they had their reservations reduced. They've been halved from 60 to 30. So that's going to help us out a lot with a lot of spirit stuff across the board, especially as we play around with more druid stuff to see how that fits in. Explosive Spear also got a massive change. It's from what I've read, and this Explosive Spear, this is anecdotal. I have no idea really much about this. From what I've read about how this ability works, and I guess this is very exciting. It used to be hard to increase the limit on this. It was just relegated to a support gem. Now you get one additional limit of Lodge Spears every 8 gem levels. So you can really ramp this up a lot better, and you get a lot more damage out of it, and you can pretty much just kind of keep this going a lot faster. So if you are playing a Huntress, this is going to be pretty advantageous to you. This is what I was talking about with the durability here of the Monk. Ghost Dance now has a max of 3 Ghost Shrouds at all gem levels. Previously 3 to 5 at gem levels 1 to 20. So you could have up to 5 Shrouds. The duration between gaining Ghost Shrouds is now, this is a really big one, 7.6 to 6.1 at the lowest. It used to be 3.8 to 305 at the lowest. So that's a pretty big hit in the teeth. Quality now instead provides 0 to 20% increased reservation efficiency. Okay. Hailstorm rounds got a lot better as well for those that are playing on Mercenary. Herald of Thunder did get a nerf, but is still quite good. The damage is now 40 to 122, down from 47 to 143. So it's not terrible. It got a little bit of a nerf. I think it's probably, honestly, I think it's more bringing this in line. For those that have been playing the last patch, they know that anything lightning related is just king because of how Herald of Thunder operates. So bringing this down, I think, is a good step to hopefully make the other heralds shine more. What I hope happens here, again, I don't know a lot of these skill changes and how they're going to affect stuff, but what I hope happens here is this just doesn't make it so that, okay, now we're all performing at the same level of herald, and not that this thing is, that it's not been balanced out, you know what I mean? Like, hey, yeah, we made a Herald of Thunder, we nerfed it a little bit, so now it has like comparative damage. But people were using Herald of Thunder because it was so strong and it could clear so well. So I'd like to see how the rest of these kind of shake out, is what I'm trying to say. Lightning Arrow no longer bypasses the charge up time on Lightning Rod's burst. So this is kind of a catch-22. So Lightning Arrow got better. So you can have a lot of fun shooting lightning arrows into lightning rods and having shit go crazy. But Lightning Rod, the limit of active lightning rods allowed is now 10, previously 20. So you get better punching power from Lightning Arrow, but Lightning Arrow's flexibility to jump around more with Lightning Rod has been reduced. Perfect Strike now deals more damage, which I guess this was fine, then nerfed, then buffed, then nerfed, and then buffed again. Or I've overstepped how many nerfed and buffs it was, but this has been buffed again, up from one nerf that it had before. Permafrost Bolts also gotten better. Siege Cascade, a little interesting one here is, so the way Siege Cascade works is, prior to this patch, quality is now 0 to 40% more damage against immobilized enemies. Previously 0 to 80%. That used to be the only thing that it had on there. Now Siege Cascade has 100% more damage against immobilized enemies and also has a quality increase here. So Siege Cascade got a lot of really good love there across the board. Volcanic Fissure now deals 101 to 166% of attack damage, previously 88 to 145. So those of you that are using that Fizzy can now get more out of it. For unique items as well as some other stuff, they've just been increased across the board. There's not any one that I want to talk about because I don't know enough of them to really speak to it. I don't want to sit here and lie to you. So they've just been increased across the board. And as I jump down here into other items, rune sockets have been renamed to augment sockets, and then they have had restrictions. So non-jewel items that go into augment sockets have been renamed from socketables to augments. Existing augment talismans have been renamed to idols, and existing items that have invalid augment sockets from the following limit changes will be unable to be used until the sockets are once again valid. So everything has had its limit pretty much brought down to 1, so you can't get too crazy with this new system. I just highlighted a bunch of them. But that's the biggest change to items that I wanted to talk about. Let's close things out with the endgame changes. So there's 2 big endgame changes I want to go over here, and it's this. Maps no longer scale pack size as you increase, and this is maps as it pertains more to the Atlas map and increasing the tiers. So maps no longer scale pack size as you increase in tier. They instead increase non-unique monster effectiveness. Effectiveness grants monsters increased life, experience, and quantity of items dropped. Tablets now have a max of 4 modifiers. You can also corrupt them now too. To unlock the ability to craft a tablet beyond 2 modifiers, you need to have defeated the Arbiter of Ash. So they were saying that after tier 15, they were ramping up the effectiveness and the pack size. And it was causing performance issues. It was causing just general lag through the game. It was just not as fun of an experience. So, and this is something that they have added in from the last patch. They're now retrofitting it, changing it in retro. They're fixing what they fixed off of community feedback. So that is now how the end game will work. You'll just have monster effectiveness increase over time versus pack sizes, which I think will be pretty good. And in addition to that, we now have kind of a gating mechanic when it comes to bosses. So bosses now have an anti-burst damage mechanic. Once a boss has finished its emerge or becomes aggro, the damage reduction period starts counting down. The damage reduction tapers down from full effect to no effect over the course of this duration. For every unit the boss moves from its starting location, the damage reduction will fall off even faster. Bosses which cannot or barely move have a shorter damage reduction period. I'm all for this. I mean, it's really fun to have like a character in an ARPG that just runs in and just completely blows up a boss. But it gets to be almost like too gamey, almost campy. When you walk in, the boss spawns and they're dead and then everything drops on the ground. So this gives us kind of a bit of a buffer, and it's not going to be so big that you can't kill the boss so fast, right? We're talking like seconds increase here. This isn't going to be something that's like, oh, my boss encounters, which went from me killing the boss instantly, are now like 4 minutes long. So I think that this is going to be a really nice adjustment to things, because I've always said that like ARPGs have an issue with bosses where they should have health gating, which is a mechanic which means once the health gets to a certain point, the boss is gated from doing damage to it because it's going to do either a phase or a transition, something that causes you to stop for a little bit. And it makes the fight more dynamic and more interesting. So this will be interesting to see how this plays into some of the new stuff that's added in with the patch. But that is the entirety of the patch notes. Go ahead and let me know in the comment section below what you're excited about. Maybe there's some things I got wrong. Maybe there's some things I did not touch on that you think are really huge and I need to go over. Let it be known in the comment section below. More than happy to talk about those things or what have you. We're going to have plenty of Path of Exile 2 coverage coming up here as the patch goes live on the 12th, and some coverage of what the Druid entails from the last stream. So be on the lookout for that coming up here on the channel. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.